Okay, there we go. Hey everybody, I'm CB or Charles, and I have here with me Tom Phillips, um, and I'm part of CBDB Productions, and Tom is with me here from Sofia. Is that right? Um,
Yeah,
but hailing from the the UK. The you
yeah. I mean, I was, I was born and grew up in the UK. I spent most of my adult life there until, well, nearly 6 years ago, 5.5 years ago.
mm,
My wife and my wife is a visual artist. I'm a writer, and we moved to Sofia in Bulgaria for, I mean, it would fill the entire time to tell you the story why that happened. But um, here we are, and it's, yeah. So our lives have changed quite dramatically, but also not particularly dramatically
mm.
in the sense that we are still doing the kind of same work that we were both doing, but in a different place. Okay.
That's that I mean drama. It's part of our lives. That's what we do. But so wow. So yeah, if maybe you could break that down in a minute about why you changed, why you moved. But I just wanted to
Mm.
whoever's new to this is a hat interview.
Yes.
Number two. We were amazed and surprised, but very honored to be the first guinea pigs of this hat interviews of West. And Tom and CBDB, myself and my wife, are part of the Western English Speaking Theater Association, which is almost over 100 different companies, organizations,
Yeah.
creatives all over the
Amazing.
world
Yeah.
promoting English speaking theater. And it's based out of the headquarters is in Kiev with our fearless leaders, Veronica and Alex, who did the first TED
Yeah.
interview. And we're gonna continue this new tradition. Um, I don't know how that works. That's not even an oxymoron, new and tradition, but
Why not?
um,
Yeah.
so Tom, so we said you're from the UK and you moved to Sofia. You moved with your wife or you met your wife?
No, no, no. I should say that my wife is English too, and we
Okay.
both decided to move here because I say that because there's this kind of cliched thing of, the English bloke finds a Bulgarian wife and moves Sophia to Sophia that way. And it's kind of interesting that when we're here, people are going, so Tom, you must have married a Bulgarian. I said, no, no, no. My, my wife is English. She's here too. And that's what's really nice, actually, is that we both moved here,
Hmm.
if you see
And
what I mean.
and
We,
met. Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
it's not like the kind of archetypal model of, um, of relationships and so on. So my wife is a visual artist. So and one of the really nice things that she's done here during COVID, all the parks in Sofia were closed,
Mm.
and so nobody was allowed into them. So that when they reopened, she's made this project which is called Birds of the Garden. She just goes and makes little clay birds and puts them in the parks for people to find with a little link to a Instagram account and so on. So it's just been really very nice how both of us have managed to find a kind of role here. I mean, because I translate Bulgarian literature, so that's why I'm here.
Hmm. that's why you moved to Sofia, um, uh, in order to be translating. Like,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was just fascinated by Bulgarian literature, in the English speaking world until last week when Georg Gospodinov and Angela Redell won the International Booker Prize. Nobody knew very much about Bulgarian literature at all.
mm-hmm.
And I, having encountered it previously, just thought it was very important and really interesting work. And that's what brought me here. But what's been really nice too is that my wife has also found a relationship or a connection with me.
And you where you're from, where in the UK originally, and
Yeah, I mean, well, my claim to fame is I was actually born in a village called Cheddington, which is
mm-hmm.
just north of London, which is where, if you've heard of it, the Great Train Robbery
Oh,
happened in 1963. I was born a year later, but which is
I feel
a
like
minor
there's
detail.
a book about that, right? I don't know if I.
Yeah. It's really, really. Oh, it's Ronnie Biggs. You know, the guy who ended up in Brazil
Mm-hmm.
and so on, and featured on a Sex Pistol record and whatever. That's where that robbery happened. But really, I spent most of my adult life in Bristol, which is probably better known for music like Massive Attack and um, Portishead and Ronnie Size and so on. So
And did
that's
you
where we lived until 5, 6 years ago. Yeah.
and were you you said you're a writer, and you said
Yeah.
that that's known for its music. Were you writing? Um, the beer came out. I wish I
Yeah.
had a. I have an air beer here too.
Oh, okay. I'm really sorry. Yeah, I'm aware of that.
No, it's all good. I appreciate that. That's the best. Just to drink in the interviews, that's and every time we say something, you do a shot of something. That'll become tradition too.
Yeah.
Um, were you writing? What got you interested in writing in the you also I before we spoke you said you and
Mm.
I asked for a couple of things beforehand. You can do that. Ask for some information beforehand or look it up. So you also write
Yeah.
poetry, and I saw that you sent me, and I also saw that you wrote some plays. Um, a lot of
Mm.
them based more on historical moments, so history, for a theater company in Bristol. Um, so what was it? Was it music at first that kind of drew you to it? Was it just were you writing lyrics, or were you is your poetry, here in Israel? We have, actually, I was talking yesterday with somebody in Hebrew. There's a word for a lyricist and a word for a poet, and it's not the same words, but it's very similar because shir is song in Hebrew and shira is a poem in Hebrew. So it's the same kind of
Okay. Yeah.
things. So tell us a little bit about how you started and what got you interested
Mm.
in writing
Yeah. I mean,
poetry.
yeah. I mean, I think your question actually has made me realize that it was a lot to do with music. I mean, I was a huge music fan as a teenager, and like I grew up. I'm nearly 60 years old, and I grew up in the punk era in Britain. So, you know, I would go to gigs, and there are bands like the Clash and the Jam and whatever playing. but they often had poets as support acts. So there would be people like John Cooper Clarke or Linton Kwesi Johnson or whatever would get up and read poems, and I'd just be like, wow, this is. So that's where I really got started. And it made me realize that writing could actually be radical and could be, well, part of it was anger, but also could be positive in the sense of putting across alternative ways of looking at the world. And that kind of idea, I guess, has kind of crossed over throughout my career. And so I started writing poetry, and then in about the mid-1990s, I guess, I started writing plays because someone asked me to. I mean, it's one of those things, isn't it? It's like I hadn't really thought about it. I'd actually in community theatre and been an actor myself. And then someone said, well, why don't you just write something? So I did. And that seemed to go okay. So over the years since then, I've written various plays, but in various different circumstances. And I think this is what you were touching on, that we were talking on before, is that, you know, some of them have been with community theatre companies in Bristol. And so there, you know, this is a great privilege for me, actually, because theatre is so expensive to actually stage. Working with community theatre companies means that community meaning non-paid actors. You know, it's a euphemism, but it gives you a tremendous opportunity to work and work with big cast plays, which is a real luxury in Britain. You know, I've been able to, you know, some of the productions that the company, that particular company I work with in Bristol, which is called Ship and Castle, that I've been able to do, I would never have been able to do in a professional company. I know that because I've worked with professional companies and they've come back to me and go, no, sorry, you've got 3 actors, off you go. And you go, all right, you know, which is fine too, but it's a really interesting combination of ways of working. So, you know, what would be a good example? Yeah, I mean, like the last play that I did before I wrote for this company, company in Bristol, a community company I work with in Bristol, was a play called No Time for Hope, which is actually, sadly, sort of rather relevant to the situation in Ukraine in a way, because it's about the assassination of the Romanovs in Russia. And I would never have been able to write that play. Well, I could have written the play, but it would never have been produced.
Yeah.
Except for the fact that I was with a community company. And so, you know, all the sort of almost stupidly big ideas about the way it could be staged and the way it could work. So you'd have, I mean, to give you precise examples, there were scenes with the Romanovs in Ekaterinburg, and like scenes with Lenin in Moscow kind of playing at the same time. I could never have done that in the professional bit.
So that leads me to actually question. I think I brought it up in previous interview. Like, I don't know if I mentioned it. Sometimes musicians get paid community theater. The actors don't.
Yeah.
The writers are like, are they getting? Are you getting a commission for the community to write something, or you're just doing it because you know this is going to be able to get staged, and that's that. I mean,
Mm.
for us creatives to see our work produced, even as a producer, director, actor, I've written some things. None of the things I've written has been produced, because I'm not that good at it yet, I don't think. But also,
You can
but
say
that's not
that.
necessarily true. I just wrote something that wouldn't necessarily would work in a very particular certain niche. Or during Corona, I wrote a couple of Zoom plays, and those were
Mhm.
during a certain niche. But the it still bothered me that, oh, I wrote something and it didn't get done. But would you write
Mm.
something just for the sake of writing it, and for community theater, the community that you work the community theater that you worked with, were you writing it because, oh, it's going to be produced? When somebody asked you to write, you were like, oh yeah, I'm going to for sure do it? Or were you thinking, there's okay, this is I need to make a living, and I need to and am I going to get paid for this? um
Yeah.
because that's something that here, there's one company I remember was like, if it's community theater, everybody needs to volunteer. It's all a collaboration of just
Mm.
people who are creating community theater, which, in my understanding, doesn't really exist yet. If you're doing a
Yeah.
musical, at least, because again, the musicians need to get paid.
Oh God.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I guess I need to make my questions shorter, but it's my question.
No, you're brilliant. I mean, I absolutely understand what you're talking about. I think my answer would be, well, it's slightly twofold. One is, yes, I love the fact that I work with this particular company back in Bristol, and they will do, or they will try to do, even the most ridiculous ideas that I have. So it's like so on one level, it's just an immense opportunity. They are now currently considering a play that I've written about the history of the Berlin Wall,
Hmm.
which would, it's, I'm sure you're aware of, like, Pink Floyd's The Wall. It would probably involve equally ambitious staging to actually do it, but
Hmm.
they're considering it. So on the one hand, there's a purely selfish um, um, feeling of that opportunity to do it, where the costs are, like, for all of us, and I don't expect to be paid in that circumstance. However, there's also the other one, which is that by doing that, that's how I kind of ended up working in professional bit,
Hmm.
because they commissioned me to write a
But then
play about the
it's
Banksy.
smaller cast. So
Yeah, yeah.
it'll
No, but I mean, what I mean was that it all goes back to about 15 years ago, and they commissioned me to write a play about the Wannsee Conference, which is when the Nazis came up with the
yeah.
final solution.
Yeah.
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 And I wrote that with some trepidation. I mean, it's obviously a hugely serious subject.
Hmm.
Um, and but um, because because the way I'd written it, and because they understood that, or the director I worked with understood the way I'd written it, what was extraordinary was I mean, basically, I wrote the Vancy conference as if it was a contemporary marketing meeting,
Wow.
if you saw, I mean, as if it was, like modern day contemporary um, business people talking about how do we market this idea. I didn't realize I'd done that at the time. I have to say, I wrote it with a great deal of passion and a great deal of, do you know what I mean? And
Yeah, yeah.
but but because this company staged that production, a number of professional producers and directors came to see it because they heard about it. They said, "Fuck me, there's this extraordinary play happening," and um, and that's what really led on to writing scripts at professional companies
Well, I mean,
on completely different.
that sounds like a really powerful piece of art. Just I mean, we talk about it a lot here in Israel,
Of
like
course.
with Yad Vashem, they're like 12. I think 12 out of the 14. I think it was 4 or 12. Most of the people who were at this conference had doctorates. So we always try to understand, like, how can someone who was like, how
Mm,
can someone who has so much knowledge, or they went to
yeah,
school, be able to sit down and discuss a final solution. So
yeah.
making it a like that kind of setting of it being a business meeting is that's very powerful. Like marketing, because marketing people are some
Well,
of the they're smart people. The marketers, they know how to catch us
yeah.
sometimes. How do you do that? Um, wow.
I mean, I will be absolutely honest with you. I hadn't realised that that's what I'd done.
Right.
Do you know? I just it isn't the play is entirely based on the rather limited transcripts of what was said at the
Mm-hmm.
time,
Mm-hmm.
because as I expect you probably know, there is a transcript of the
Yeah.
meeting, but it kind of there are lots of gaps and so
Mm-hmm.
on. And so I had to invent things.
Right.
Um,
That's the genius of writing too.
that's what
In
writing does. But then you can't, and I hadn't, and like I say, until it was actually performed, and quite a few people who work in marketing and work in like our
mm-hmm.
contemporary world, they came up to me, and that's when I realized. They said, God, this is the kind of language I use in everyday life now. But
Wow.
the only difference is that well, there's a bit, there wasn't the sort of Nuremberg protocol or whatever they called it or whatever. There's
Right. Are,
the
do you
specific stuff.
do you do you as a writer, um uh d is the like, you have to create something from nothing sometimes, or sometimes you have,
Yeah,
history to look
yeah,
at.
yeah.
And we as a, I mean, as a producer or director or a performer, we get the product already when it's already finished. um and then we have to try to interpret that. But the beginning steps of writing, is it how is that for you? Do you need to take um some time to figure out what you want to write? Does it come to you by sitting on the in Sofia? Is there subways or the train?
Yeah, yeah, we have subways. Yeah.
Yeah, so when you're sitting on the subway and you get inspired by something, or are you just flipping through a bunch of different books and then What's the seeds that starts your ideas?
Ah, okay. Well, I have a very good. I maybe this is a good example. This is a completely different play. So we've been talking about this play about the Holocaust that I wrote. A completely different play that I wrote for one of the professional productions is a play called 100 Miles North of Timbuktu. And it's a play about climate change, actually. I didn't I didn't really realize that was what it was about until I'd written it, if you see what I mean. And that came about from a very, very specific thing. And this is, I mean, I also teach creative writing, so I'm kind of slightly conscious, self-conscious
Hmm.
about the way I work. And about 10 years ago, I was commissioned to write a play by a professional company in Bristol called Theatre West. And
Not
they
related. I
gathered
saw that.
together
That's not
about
related to
five.
the West, right? There,
It's Theatre West as in west of England,
yeah,
not
yeah,
not anything. Yeah,
okay.
they're a Bristol-based company.
Hmm.
And so they got five of us or whatever, 10 of us, I think, into a room, and we had to take numbers out of a hat. Very appropriate, actually, given our hat-related uh, conversation here. And those numbers equated to a little square on a map of Bristol. And so I had to go there to this little square on the map and see what I could find as the inspiration for a play.
Hmm.
And um, it was I got a really, really bad bit of Bristol. It was just like the dullest bit of Bristol you can. It was just like there was a boarded up pub and like a car park. I was just wandering around this bit of Bristol thinking, where am I going to get a play out of this? You know, this is just so dull. It was raining, it was grey. And anyway, then I just saw a notice outside a small business. And it just said, I think that's right, because I've been, I think it just said climatic services, climactic services. I thought, no, climatic services. I thought, that's interesting. What if there was a company that could actually service the climate? You see what I mean, where I'm going here? And it was just that little tiny detail that ended up becoming this play called 100 Miles North of Timbuktu, which is all about some people who invented a piece of software, an app that you could download onto your laptop and you could control the weather wherever you were. And what are the consequences of that? Well, of course, the consequences of that are the entire destruction of the planet because, you know, humans unfortunately don't behave very responsibly.
Right.
And that's like one of my, I guess, when I was, and it's very interesting how when that play actually came about, and when I was watching it in performance, it was interesting how that linked with the play that I was also talking about the Bansi conference, called Albrecht Right. How those two things were actually quite similar, but dealt with in completely different ways. So, Albrecht Fry about the Bansi conferences, obviously tragic, horrific story, but 100 Miles North was a farce and a comedy. But what linked them was this idea of people just not taking responsibility for their action.
Hmm.
Yeah, you see what I mean? So like the Nazis in the Bansi play weren't thinking about the consequences of what they were talking about, and then these kind of rather sort of bizarre characters trapped on a small trading estate in Bristol now making up this software that can control the weather weren't thinking about their responsibilities either. That's one of the things that really interests
That's that's I mean, are your plays usually around that kind of theme, or that this just happened to be a coincidence between those? That's my first thing I wanted to ask. But I'm gonna say that I think Alex and Veronica kind of also weren't thinking about the responsibility of their actions when they created this hat interview, because we could go on for hours.
me. Yeah,
uh,
I
so
know.
I want
It's
to
fantastic. It's
I
just
know
great.
it's amazing. Um, so I think I want to give another 10 minutes. Maybe I'll try to like time it and see. But I
Okay.
wanted to
Yeah, I'm not.
go into, because you you mentioned to me when we were setting this up about my ideas about collaboration, and
Mm,
you really wanted to talk about that. So I wanted to kind of bring us to that of collaboration. Um, and then maybe we'll end with because you're a writer, and you meant like you again, like I think you mentioned to me before, like, oh, I'm just the writer, then there's the direct interview, but really writers are extremely important piece of the puzzle of creatives. Um, I mean, I know this from just watching the youth that I work with, and
yeah.
what they do, and how amazing it is to see them writing the short plays that they work on, and meeting all the writers the creatives I meet in the States that work with them. But what's happening now in the United States with the WGA, the Writers Guild Association, and how
Mm,
that's affecting the Tonys, and maybe we'll get to that. We'll see if we have enough time. But on to collaboration.
yeah.
Uh, I I know, like, you're part of West already, and I am too, and I think that West itself is very big on collaboration. Um,
Mm,
and you're working um, remotely for you're still with
yeah.
working with Bristol and collaborating with other different theater companies. But what exactly, when you talk about collaboration, like, what are your ideas? Like, what is your how's that a passion for you, collaborating with others in art? I mean, we always need collaboration with others to really,
Mm,
I think, to really get our ideas out. And
mm,
a writer needs not always, but a writer usually needs a producer or director to really.
yeah.
And I think what you
Yeah.
said beforehand about the play about the if I'm pronouncing it right, the Vancy the conference, um
Mm,
that you only afterwards, a sort of a collaboration with the audience, or the people who saw the play, you
yeah.
understood more about what it was. So
Yeah.
I'll leave it. The floor is yours.
Okay. Um, yeah, I completely understand your question. Yeah, I think what I've learned from working in theatre is the importance of collaboration, and at whatever level. I've been very lucky, I feel, um, to have worked with groups of people, whether they're actors or an a group of actors and a director or a producer or all those people who are involved in the actual process of getting theatre to the stage in whatever context. Um, and I sat around a table with a director and one of my first plays that was read was set in Albania, because this is before we moved to Bulgaria. This is 15, 16 years ago. And I wrote this play rather precociously about Albania, a country which I'd only been to for about a week at that point. But its history had fascinated me, and it's just extraordinary. And I can remember sitting around a table with the director and all the cast who were going to perform this play. And it was just extraordinary. And they, in terms of the questions that they asked and the kind of way that the writing could be slightly adjusted to this or that or whatever. So that was one of the earliest things. And then one of the last plays I did in Britain before we moved here was a play called Coastal Defences, which is set in Bulgaria in 2013. And it was absolutely extraordinary because this is a theatre called the Tobacco Factory in Bristol, which has always been sort of very good at supporting supporting development projects. So if you have an idea, you go to them and they go, okay, we like that. We'll give you a bit of money. We'll give you a bit of time. You can work with a director or and maybe some car. And it ended up being a play and being produced, which was rather great. But also one of the funniest things was about a month before we went into rehearsal, the director said, I think we should have a research and development weekend, Tom. So, okay, fine. And I hadn't really finished the script at this point. I knew all the sorts of various setups, and it's one of these professional productions where I only had 3 actors. So I was horrible and cruel and had already created 12 different characters. So they all had to multi-role quite a lot of stuff. They already hated me. And, not really. And
those are the fun ones.
Yeah. So well, they got some good roles. Hey, come on. There were some funny jokes. And it's a comedy, and it was a kind of, and we got into this R&D weekend, and all I can remember is we read through the script, kind of trying to work out who the characters were and, all that stuff. And they said, so what's the ending? I said, well, I don't, Nick, he was the director. And I said, we haven't really discussed that yet. So we said, what do you think? And virtually all of the actors said, well, my character obviously dies. It was just like, it was kind of I said, what? You want this kind of on-stage massacre with 12 people? But they all survived, as it happened. But that's the kind. It was really interesting how sort of collaborating right along that process with actors, with a director, and in fact with a designer and a sound designer as well. I just loved it. I think that's the way to go, really. I as I say, I teach creative writing now, and I routinely say to students on sort of script writing courses, so way long gone are the days where a script writer sat at home and wrote a play and then took it to the theatre and said to there you go, this is it. Mm-hmm. Here you go. I mean, I just love the idea of the writer being in the space with the actor, with the actors, sorry, and the director and the or whoever, really. You know, I've seen that in Bristol. There's a very, very good British director called Sally Clarkson, who I think has worked with companies like Knee-High and whatever in Britain, who are among, you know, who do really interesting work
Hmm.
through this collaborative process. And it must be interesting for you with young people, I would
Oh
imagine.
yeah, yeah. It's I mean that's what they're doing. I always tell them after they have 4 weeks to work with their mentor, then about 2 weeks before they actually go into rehearsals. And
Uh-huh.
whenever they're stuck, I tell them, don't worry, when we get into rehearsals, you'll see things that'll help you. And even if you didn't finish the full
It
play,
will take it.
it'll take you to the next level of like you'll see what
Yeah.
the performers are doing. And so don't worry, then you have 2 months before the actual uh production to still tweak things. So
Uh-huh.
um they don't need to bring a finished product. They need to bring a first draft, but not a finished
Yeah.
product.
Yeah.
Long
That's
gone
what
are those
I,
days, right?
yeah, yeah. I think that's really important. That's what, that again is also always in my mind as a writer,
Yeah.
is that I'm not bringing a finished product. I'm not, you know, during COVID and all the lockdown, um, obviously not many opportunities for a theatre writer during that time. But I also did some work online
Yeah.
and with a group based in the UK in general with Mark Ravenhill. I don't know if you
No, no, no.
know of him. Oh, okay. Um, and we would meet every Saturday night and read work. Um,
Wonderful.
yeah, it was just fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean,
It, yeah.
from
It
all
was
over,
a good creative time for there were ways to still keep at it.
yeah,
Not necessarily getting it out onto live stages and not necessarily getting paid, but we could still be creative. I
yeah.
think we're gonna not get into the whole
Okay.
WGA thing because
Well, we're talking, yeah,
we're
yeah,
running out of time.
yeah.
But this was really fascinating. Um, I it's really great. I really appreciate this hat interview starting.
Thank you.
And
Yeah,
it's
I
been
think it's
wonderful.
brilliant. I mean, mm,
And good
really
luck
good
to
to meet.
you for the next one. I'm looking forward
Yeah,
to seeing it. I'm gonna
who knows?
yeah, we'll say goodbye now. I'm
Yeah.
gonna stop the recording. Um,
Okay.
okay.
Thank you so much. It's been really good to talk to you.
Yeah. Bye everybody. Here we go.